children are bastards! And she is a whore.
The thing about this scene is, I mean, we have been tiptoeing around these words more or less for 10 years now. And here it is. It's out in the open. And what happens?
It's been a lot of winking and nodding and, flexing the bicep and pointing to it. But here goes Vaemond, and he's just going to come right out and say it.
Ooh.
And, props to him.
For speaking the truth.
Also rip to him.
Yeah, that was like classic Thrones right there. It's like, you know what happens when you yell whore? Someone's going to cut your head off.
Absolutely. And shouts to the Silent Sisters doing a great job preserving the top half of the head for the funereal rites. A thankless job.
The Lord's work, truly.
It really is. Welcome to the official Game of Thrones podcast, House of the Dragon. I'm Jason Concepcion, host of the podcast X-Ray Vision from Crooked Media.
And I am Greta Johnson, host of WBEZ's Nerdette podcast. And this is a Game of Thrones podcast for everyone, whether you are an OG Thrones watcher or you just started your journey with the HBO original series, House of the Dragon.
Must be tough having dinner right after seeing someone get half of their head cut off.
You don't think that would make you hungry? Is that what you're saying?
I think it would spoil my appetite a little bit, yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's a fair point. This was a hell of an ep, Jason, I gotta say. I mean, it's interesting thinking of it in terms of like the arc of the 10 episodes, because in a lot of ways, not a whole lot of stuff happened, but enough really big stuff happened that I'm excited to talk to you about this one.
Oh, same. Legitimately had chills when the doors to the throne room swing open.
Oh my God.
King Viserys of House Targaryen, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm.
And Viserys, with the last dregs of his strength, comes tottering into the hall.
Tottering, that's good. I wrote stumbling. I was trying to think of the best verb to describe like the deep, inherent spiritual and physical struggle that man went through to get from one side of the throne room to the other.
I mean, it was really something. And, again at the dinner with the last bits of his emotional energy, just trying with everything he has left to knit the realm together and hold it together from tearing apart. And it's tragic to know that he probably did not succeed.
I mean, he did his best. I think he tried. He kept trying, but yeah, I don't think it did what it needed to do.
Well, Greta, do you want to take us through the recap?
Yes, I would love to. We are in episode 8. 6 years have passed. Corlys Velaryon, the sea snake, is seriously injured in battle, which means Corlys's brother, Vaemond, is real fired up about who's going to take Driftmark if he dies.
Oh, yeah.
Tensions with the Triarchy are heating up, and Vaemond is worried about who will be in charge of the fleet. He also thinks his blood claim is better than Rhaenyra's bastard kid, which, isn't wrong.
Alleged.
We can put alleged in there if you want. Everybody heads to King's Landing for a hearing, which seems pretty stacked against Team Black until Viserys stumbles into the throne room to chime in. Family rifts are definitely getting bigger in this episode. Other quick updates. Helena and Aegon are married. Aegon is a sexual predator. There's another kid named Aegon. More cousins are betrothed. Daemon got 3 dragon eggs, and it seems that King Viserys has finally left this mortal coil. So, Jason, you thought of a good theme for this week's ep. What are we working with today?
It's the last gasp for peace, the last breath exhaling from King Viserys's beleaguered lungs and body.
Good Lord. Yeah.
It felt like the slimmest of windows for peace to be sealed and to bind up the wounds that have bedeviled the realm. And it almost worked. It really almost worked. I mean, there was real warmth around that table. People were laughing. People were smiling. Otto Hightower was giving little claps. There was a dance.
Yeah.
Yes, it was Jace dancing with Helena in order to spite Aegon, but it was wonderful anyway.
I do think there was one sliver in there that was really interesting, though, which was between Rhaenyra and Alicent, because those two gave beautiful speeches.
I wish to raise my cup to Her Grace the Queen.
Your graciousness moves me deeply, Princess. We have more in common than we sometimes allow. I raise my cup to you and to your house. You will make a fine queen.
They were very heartfelt. They both really seemed to honor each other and where the other person was coming from in a very kind of like restorative justice sort of way.
Yeah.
And even at the end of that scene when Rhaenyra's like, listen, I gotta go, but I'll come back. I'll come back on my dragon. We can hang. I thought partly was so interesting because, I don't know, I'm curious to see what's next for them in their relationship, but it also seemed so clear to me that the story is so much bigger than them at this point. You know what I mean?
I completely agree. And first of all, incredible courage from Rhaenyra, like really heart-wrenching courage to stand up and give that really emotional, deeply touching toast to her once friend.
Yeah.
But I found myself wondering, I found it sincere as well. But there was that moment with Rhaenyra and Rhaenys in the Godswood.
Back Luke's claim, and let us betroth Laena's children to mine.
And Rhaenys says, it's a great deal, but is it desperate, I wonder? And Rhaenyra says, what does it matter?
Yeah.
And I wonder what your take is. It was sincere, yes, her toast to Alicent. But was some of it born of
desperation?
I've just got to take this half-court heave right now.
You know, it's a great question because I think you could have asked the same question around Rhaenyra and Daemon getting married, right? It seems to me like it's coming from a very similar place. I read it as having an emotional truth that makes sense for me. It doesn't feel out of character or dishonest, but it does seem like it could be playing multiple advantages for her. You know, like she has to do what she can, right?
Yeah. Another thing that really resonated with me was, first of all, the fact that that speech had a chance with Alicent. Her heart was open for that. There were signals that this was the case as soon as Daemon and Rhaenyra arrived. Yes, they got the cold shoulder. No one was there to meet them at the gate except for Lord Caswell. But there's all these 7-pointed stars, the Faith of the Seven symbology all around.
Yeah.
And, you know, we remember that early scene from The Sept where Alicent reached out to Rhaenyra and said, you should try and mourn your mother. This helped me. And it's clear to me that she's really rediscovered her faith because of the guilt of what she's done and what she may have to do. She's wearing the 7-pointed star medallion. And it felt like her faith has in some way opened her heart more. That's how I took it, because it felt like she, despite the fact that we saw her rush across the room to try and cut Luke's eye out,
yeah.
You know, 6 years down the line, she has really pulled back from that kind of energy. And she feels quite burdened by sadness. You could see it. I mean, you know, Otto says at one point, you got to steel yourself. You got to get your nerve up for what we have to do.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you mention her running across the room because for us, that was only last episode. I do think this 6-year jump between these episodes was the most jarring for me. I'm curious if it read differently for you, especially, you know, just as the book reader who has a little more context. But, you know, we've got new kids.
Yeah.
I mean, like new actors portraying kids and then literal also new children. There's just a lot going on. And I can't help but wonder also, I mean, we got some little pieces about what's happened over the last 6 years, but we got a lot less context than we did in our 10-year jump, I think.
It was a lot. I want to help some of our listeners out also by pointing out that, so in addition to new actors playing characters we've seen, there's a bunch of new characters, including Lord Jasper Wilde, the Iron Rod, who is the new Master of Laws. And, okay, so when Queen Alicent is coming from the small council meeting, a knight of the Kingsguard comes up and brings a message about an issue with Prince Aegon. And Allison is like, Sir Eric, I don't have time for this. And he's like, actually, it's Sir Auric. Okay. That is Sir Auric Cargill.
I feel like this is such a like New York, New Jersey pronunciation. It's like the Mary,
really
whatever thing where it's like, I don't hear the difference.
It's with an A. So Eric with an A.
Eric.
And his twin brother, identical twin brother, is named Eric Cargill, also of the Kingsguard, which means Sir Auric and Sir Eric are now our second set of twins on this show, in addition to Thailand and Jason Lannister, Thailand being the master of ships, and he is currently, he was in this episode as well. So just to help people, get their bearings in this, there are now two sets of twins.
Is that going to be the comedic relief we need in this show? Is that going to provide it for us?
In the books, the fictional historians stress that they were completely physically identical to the point that, and of course they're both wearing the same uniform, to the point that everyone around them was constantly mistaken in terms of who they were talking to. They did not know who was who.
Is it possible there's actually just one of them and he's playing a big trick on everybody? And his name is Auric.
The third. What if there's actually a third brother and he's just not, and he subs in for one of them? No, that's not the case. There's definitely two of them. I'll leave it at that.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. So what did you think of the time jump, though?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to take in, and it is absolutely jaw-dropping to realize that we have spanned almost 30 years in the course of this show.
It's crazy.
Rhaenyra is now 33, 34, 35 years old with 6 kids.
Woof.
That is amazing. Jace is a young man. Aegon is married with kids of his own, which we hear them mention that Helena and he have kids. It was a lot. It's a lot to take in, and it's a lot to kind of process. Gosh, where are we? Not to mention the fact that it's been 6 years, at least 6 years since Rhaenys saw Corlys, but it feels like it's been 600 years for King Viserys, who is like 3/4 decayed.
Oh my God, just sloughing off of his body.
The fact that he and Daemon are, in terms of the books, only 4 years apart is shocking stuff.
He did not look good.
Was there anything in particular that bumped you in terms of this time jump?
About the 6 years? I don't know. I think in some ways it's tricky for me to believe that Rhaenyra would have stayed away for 6 years, especially given how unwell Viserys was in the last episode. And I know all those relationships were super rocky, but I don't know. It just seemed they've always had such a strong bond that it's just kind of difficult for me to imagine her piecing out to that extent, Let me ask you this. We meet back up with Mysaria in this episode, and she has the Queen's handmaiden in her employ who is delivering messages to her about the goings-on in the castle. And we don't know who Mysaria is working for. I guess we should consider the possibility that she is working for Daemon and has been delivering news of the capital, of the goings-on in the Red Keep to Daemon and Rhaenyra over these years. It's possible. It's possible, but even if you're getting intel about your sick dad, at what point do you think I should really show up and spend some time with my sick dad? Obviously he is not doing well and hasn't been for quite some time. This has been a 6-year decline, essentially, we could gather,
Yeah, and as we talked about last week, his death is the starter's pistol that all these competitors are waiting for. And you definitely want to be in the capital when that happens, when he passes, because I don't know, but you get the picture that the rules are not going to be strictly abided by. I was really struck. So one of our other new characters is Jasper Wilde, the Master of Laws. And we meet him at the small council meeting, and you get, I think, a good snippet that tells you a lot about his character when he says, well, actually, Corlys never officially named Laenor his heir. The paperwork was actually not filed. If you check it, he didn't actually file that stuff or the date,
Yeah, he didn't sign it.
He is very much looking for these kind of like legal loopholes in order to get what his side wants accomplished. So you get the picture that the Greens are not going to abide by the letter of the law when it comes to the succession. And I'm sure that Rhaenyra's side wouldn't either.
Well, and you see that even in that hearing before Viserys shows up, right? I mean, they're sitting in the throne pretty much.
Otto was extremely comfortable.
Exactly.
And Alicent basically flaunted it in their face when she has that meeting with Rhaenyra and Daemon.
The emblems of the Seven serve only to guide us on an uncertain path, to remind us of a higher authority.
And on the morrow, which authority will sit in judgment of my son's claim on his own inheritance?
That would be mine. And the Hand's. But be assured the Father is just and commands me to forget the accusations you have held in this room today.
Oh, me and Otto,
gods.
like it's good. Yeah, and the gods will...
Just have faith that
Yeah, don't worry about it. It'll be good.
Yeah.
Like, we'll forgive you for everything that you've said. The gods will forgive, and you'll get a fair hearing. And clearly untrue, and everybody knows it.
Right, yeah. So here's a question for you. I mean, Alicent is at the small council meeting making calls. It's pretty clear that Viserys hasn't made it to one of those meetings in quite some time.
Yeah.
He is addled, whether it's, from milk of the poppy or just the pain he's in if he's not drugged. So to that end, could you not argue that the realm has had a queen?
I think you could argue that. And I think Rhaenyra tries to. She says...
Yeah, you've been running the show here, obviously.
And then Alicent tries to argue quite strongly. No, well, as you well know, I'm just keeping it warm.
Yeah, I'm just standing in.
For Prince Aegon and excuse me, for yourself. So I think you could argue that. But again, I think this is one of those blind spots that the realm has. There are times when they are comfortable with a woman in the lead, and that is when they are sure that it is temporary.
Sure. Yeah.
Back to the beginning of that scene when Alicent comes in to greet Rhaenyra and Prince Daemon, and Rhaenyra has her arm down.
Yes.
With the scar showing, and then she covers it up in an attempt to bury the past, essentially. Let's move past that if there is any chance to move past that. That really stood out to me as something that really interesting, an awareness on her part of what they've done to each other.
That's interesting because you could almost read it the other way, where by kind of moving her arm and hiding it the way she did, she's actually calling attention to it that she might not have if she had just kind of left it out in the open and ignored it because it's irrelevant.
Yeah, I could see it that way as well.
That was a hell of a moment, though, for sure.
Yeah, the dynamic between those two in this episode. Again, it feels like if you could just get Otto and the rest out of here, even Daemon, for the love of their kids, I think that they could figure it out because they must know that if it does come to war, there's no way that either side emerges from this unscathed. Like no one's getting away with this with all of their beloved ones intact and whole and healthy.
Yeah, it's all just so complicated at this point. I think you're totally